Hi folks, welcome to Thursday's edition of the iWrite Radio podcast stroke videocast. We've got Jimmy Hutton back. Hello Jimmy.
All right.
Hi Jimmy.
And Stuart Lockhead and myself, Norrie Stewart. We're going to cover just basically two things today. FMQs, First Minister's Questions, and Richie Sunak's announcement in Westminster about how much less money the government's going to give people that need it, because that's the Tory way. Am I showing bias there? I think I must be. Stuart, you took copious notes and followed FMQs really closely, so I wonder if you could give us a breakdown.
I won't go into the detail here. I've got 5 pages of notes. Like what I said to you when I first came on before we opened the mics and the camera. It's possibly the most interesting FMQs for years, which it came as a complete surprise. I thought it would be like with the ones we've had recently. We had actually serious questions. We had some challenges from the opposition leaders. Remarkably, of all the opposition leaders, Ruth was the gentlest with the First Minister. She didn't push very hard. We also had a slew of what you might call constituency questions. Some of them relating to the pandemic, and others were questions like a menor strike, BiFab, other things that really these things keep coming up. And so in that sense, it was fulsome is the word. There's a good one. And as I say, I was amazed that Ruth has not been pushing very hard for weeks.
I think the most interesting thing about Ruth was the same last week. She's playing Miss Sensible, Baroness Reasonable. It must be very difficult actually to be the main opposition party at the moment when you're also the party in government at Westminster. Because anything she attacks Sturgeon with can be labelled ×2 at Boris Johnson. So I think she's just treading really carefully. What do you think, Jim?
I think she thinks so. Her heat's button up the back. I think Dross has decided to rebrand himself as a caring conservative. Hence the reason you get that daft walloper asking the question about social housing that Nicola really wanted to batter her up and down the place, but couldn't because she was doing it remotely. And Douglas Ross the other day talking about feeding school bairns, having previously voted against it constantly when he's been in London. So
I think Ruth voted against it for England. That was an English votes for English laws thing, and all the Scottish MPs voted with the government when their vote didn't count. Very strange. Stuart.
No, you're right. Jimmy, you're right. I noticed that Rachel Hamilton was her name, the rural Tory, and straight away she was asking about social housing, and you're just thinking, yes, this does seem to be a bit of a plan from the Scottish Tories at the moment. They're trying to pretend to be nice. I don't know. Who's going to believe them?
Do the Tories still sell council houses down south?
Yes.
Yes. The right to buy is still in operation down there, I believe.
Right. Well, that's what you do every time they stand up and start kidding on they care about social housing.
Well, she also blatantly lied and said that they weren't on track to meet their target of 50,000 in this Parliament pre-COVID, which is just a nonsense. They absolutely were, and the only reason that they won't meet their target is because the building sites were shut down for 4 months until they could get, 3 months I think they were shut before they actually got sites open again with minimal staffing.
Well, that's going to be almost a prerequisite from when the pandemic fades. That's what it's going to be. Oh, you've missed your target on cancer operations. You've missed your building target. Oh, and COVID wasn't that big an effect. It only took half the year out,
Aye, so this year they'll have, in this Parliament, they'll probably only deliver around 40 of the 50,000 affordable homes that they promised. But prior to that, they delivered 23,000 of the 23,000 that they were going to. And prior to that, I do believe that the Labour and Liberal parties managed to deliver about 6 affordable homes.
Yes, aye, it wasn't good.
Oh no, the First Minister really did push back on this, and she got tore into Rachel Hamilton about the fact that you don't get full benefit rights for housing because of the Tory government. This is what we used to call the bedroom tax.
Aye.
All right.
No, she got tore. She had a go at the Tory about that. I wrote right at the start. I've written here under Rachel Hamilton's name a new policy.
Just what's the Tories going to come up with a policy to build 40 million social housing?
Oh, they're going to build all these new houses in the southeast of England and floodplains, and then they're all going to get flooded.
Haven't they managed to burn down more social housing than they've managed to build in England over the last few years?
Oh, Jimmy. Oh, nice one.
Sorry. I just when I see the Tories and social housing, it does get under my skin. I'll tell you what else got under my skin today. I'd agree with Stuart. It was a fabby First Minister's questions, but can we please ban the use of the phrase "students away from home for the first time in their lives"? Every one of the four main opposition leaders used that. You know what I mean? I didn't care if you've got to the age of going to uni and you've never been out your mother and father's house, you're a bit of a clout. And frankly, it's a horrible cliche, and I think we should ban it for Parliament.
Oh, no, you're right. All these people must think their children, they must keep their children in cotton wool. When I left my mother's home, I set off in my Mini, and I was homeless for a month. I lived in my Mini for a month, and then after that, I left on the building site shed's floor for the rest of the
well, you see, you were lucky. You left home. My parents left me and threw me out. Dad was working overseas.
See, this is what I over tit, guys. If any of you two should ever have been living in a Mini, it's you, Norrie. Stuart, you're way too tall to live in a Mini, man.
I had luxury. I had luxury, Jimmy. I lived in a caravan.
Jimmy, it was worse than that. I felt guilty about somebody because I was homeless. You got to know street people who were sleeping rough, and I had a guy. He slept in the front seat because there was a steering wheel there, and he was shorter than me. And I actually swapped my car, my Mini, for a 6-seat Vauxhall Cresta, simply because it was bigger.
Oh, how the other half live, eh?
And what did you do, Jimmy? You went and slept on an army cot.
I did, mate. Aye. Much to my chagrin these days, but I've made worse decisions. The army wasn't the worst, mate, strangely.
But coming back to the topic of students, because I suppose students was the main topic for all the leaders.
Aye.
And it was even overflowed into the question about no evictions. Oh my goodness, Neil Findlay was nice. He even complimented Michael Matheson, but that's because he was talking about miners' strikes. That's another issue, of course.
Well, the student thing, I mean, the answer to nearly every one of the questions was, it's running rampant because they're not doing as they were told.
Mm-hmm.
That was the answer. The only way you can police students is to give each of them a bodyguard with a taser.
You're probably no far off the mark, mate. The reality is, I have no idea why the Scottish Government went along with the university's desire to have students in halls this year. When you look at it, it was guaranteed that this would happen. The Scottish Government have went along with that because the universities basically want the money. They've had these halls built. They've got contracts to fulfil by putting students in them. But it's interesting to note that everything else is operating well. The contact tracing's working. They're finding people who need to be found.
I mean, all the questions, as I say, could have been answered. The other answer was, okay, lads, what did you think we should do? Do you think we should have stopped students going back at all?
Well, no, I look, I'm going to claim that I even brought this subject up last week because I mentioned the fact that I went down Porty Beach and Joe Public were sat social distancing and there were all these students in little crowds on the beach as if there was no such thing as social distancing. And I wasn't trying to criticise them at all. In fact, I won't, because I know they're hormonally driven. At 20 years old, they have no idea what is going, why they're, where, you know, they're actually, it's like they're walking, it's like their head and shoulders are back and their groin is pulling them forwards. They can't help themselves.
I can't remember.
Well, at least we managed to get old Tricky Dicky Bouncy to get all excited and start. I mean, we're in September, we've not got to Halloween or anything yet, and he's already talking about Nicola being the Grinch and cancelling Christmas.
She should have
dubbing them up for Christmas. It was lovely.
She should have repeated our, yeah, I'll just have a look at my crystal ball that's sitting beside my magic wand.
Mm.
Well, she pushed back at that point about Christmas, you know, she wasn't happy about that.
It's kind of been hinted at. Matt Hancock hinted at it this morning, actually, on, I don't know which radio station he was on, but he kind of hinted that students in England might not be able to go home at Christmas. And I'm like, are you really want to be the first one fired by Boris? Because I've kind of thought he would be the first one fired by Boris for some time, but if he talks about cancelling Christmas, Boris will cut him loose.
No, I don't think, I'm sorry, I don't agree with you there, Jimmy. I think one thing that Matt Hancock has proved to be is being a good buffer for Boris. He's keeping everybody away from Boris.
I
think
he's like a punch bag, you know.
Aye, but he's not big enough punch bag, mate. People will punch that out the road to get to Boris because they're choking to land a blow on Boris.
I think we've seen a tactical change with the Tories. I think they're now going to start preaching Armageddon. So anything less than Armageddon makes them look good. They've moved from lying about the numbers, keeping the numbers small and telling everybody everything's going to be all right. They're now dropping hints about how terrible it's going to be. I think they'll ramp that up.
No, you're right, Nora, because that's why they're talking about
it won't be as bad.
What it's like in Italy and Spain and France, because they can say, oh, look how awful it's going to be. It's like a rewind back to March. Well, look how awful it's going to be if we don't clamp down.
Well, I think talking about comparisons, Northern Ireland has really fallen off the cliff on this one. They're way ahead of everybody. I don't know what happened there.
Nah, you're right. Their numbers were superb for a long time.
Well, they were the best of us. All the four nations, they were doing the best. And suddenly it's gone through the roof across there.
It's inseparable from what's happening in the Republic. But I'm not saying it's very different in the Republic, but it is different. It's not the same as the UK 4. So, I mean, whatever is happening there, it's bound to impact. The one thing that was it Willie Ronnie that brought up cruise ships. As soon as he mentioned cruise ships, I must admit it was like, oh yeah, halls of residence. God, I mean, what do they do in cruise ships? They drink and then they have sex.
Aye, but Willie's he's still being stupid. You know, he's asking for routine testing on campuses. Nobody's called for that, other than wee daft Willie, because it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money, and it's a waste of resource.
Yeah, but he did even better this week. He asked her a question. She answered. He then agreed basically with her answer coming from a different direction, which she pointed out to him. Yeah, well, Willie, you know, you're actually agreeing with me. You've just got a different emphasis on the same answer. It was quite astonishing. What was his question again? Yeah, it was about mass testing of all students.
Well, she gave one of her best, clearest answers on the question of routine testing. And she said, you know, compliance with, they raised the issue of behavioural science. Just, nobody can quite agree. If you have people tested that don't have any symptoms, do they run around then not caring about washing their hands and social distancing? Or do they now behave themselves? And, you know, which way do they go?
The answer to most of these questions is the same. You get tested at 5 o'clock on Tuesday and you test negative. It doesn't mean at 6 o'clock on Tuesday you won't be showing symptoms.
The worry is that the behaviour of the person that's just been tested and gets a clear test, they suddenly rush off to the pub and hug all their friends. I'm all right.
And that's why she keeps emphasising the only defence is quarantine. That's it. That's how you stop the spread. people who are infectious and don't go anywhere near people who aren't infectious.
I just found that, as I say, you've got Richard Leonard lying again, saying that students are waiting for tests when they're not. I don't know how many times lately he seemed to not understand what he's being told. He said it a couple of times today, and he was clearly told, no, the students that need testing are getting tested. When they come forward, they're getting tested. They're not having to wait. But he's asserting different to that, and I'm wondering if now he knows he's not going to be there that long, so he's happy just to tell lies now. He doesn't have to live with the consequences of his lying.
It highlights for me the problem I've always had with this thing that's done at question time. And it happens in the Commons as well, where somebody stands up and says, Effie McGlumpy contacted me about her ingrown toenails and she's having to wait 6 weeks.
Effie McGlumpy.
Right.
Effie's always had louping feet like.
and
McGlumpy.
And you can't then say, well, look, Effie McGlumpy lives in a treehouse in the middle of nowhere.
Auchenshuggle. She's got to live in Auchenshuggle.
Well, Auchenshuggle in a treehouse that she can't climb out of. Therefore, she can't attend appointments. So this is a specially set up appointment, blah, blah, blah.
Aye, that's why
but everybody else in the country with ingrown toenails has been seen within 15 minutes of making the phone call. You know, and Richard Leonard's doing that. It's had some student that didn't get a test because he couldn't go to the 3 o'clock test because he had a lecture. You know, I mean, it's almost like they expect to phone up and say, well, look, I want a test and I'm available between 4:30 and 4:45 on Tuesday evening.
Well, don't get me wrong, Norrie, I think there's students out there that are that entitled, but I'd be very surprised if any of them are in Glasgow. It's usually the posh ones that are in Edinburgh
or St
that
Andrews.
Are that entitled, eh?
So they say, or St Andrews.
It's a Tory conspiracy. The first walk-in testing station was set up in St Andrews. I'll tell you.
The excuse for that was they've got a lot of international students.
They have, indeed. And a lot
can I give the viewers and listeners some, well, what I think is good news? It's about the miners' strike. And they're liable to be issuing, there's a report coming out because Michael Matheson, who was Justice Secretary before Humza Yousaf, commissioned a report into the miners' strike, and that includes police behaviour and various aspects of it. And it looks as though there's going to be pardons for the convictions.
Is that not already decided?
But the report's not getting published until next month, mate. So Sunak didn't want to preempt it by actually admitting what people basically already know.
But Annabel Ewing, who is the MSP for Cowdenbeaton district, which is a severe, that used to be represented by a communist MP, wasn't it?
Yeah. Big mining area. So that takes me back.
She seemed to know that what would be in the report, which I'm not surprised about. Because that's good news for the families, because they...
And Neil Finlay, didn't attend today? Yes. Stood up and congratulated her?
I know.
Did he?
He did.
I missed this.
You know, he congratulated Michael Matheson. He said, hands up to Michael Matheson for commissioning this report.
I'd like to give special mention to Claire Baker. Horrible looking wee thing. But I've no idea why she would use her opportunity to question the First Minister to be a mouthpiece for the GMB. She basically stood up and said what Gary Smith would have said had he ever shut his mouth long enough to be able to get in the door of the Scottish Parliament. But he'd never managed to get through them double doors because I've seen his mouth. But it was a horrendous question blaming the Scottish Government for SSE not just handing a contract to BiFab. Scottish Government can't instruct SSE to do anything whatsoever. And BiFab wouldn't be opened if it wouldn't still be open and in existence if it wasn't for the Scottish Government. But Claire Baker still has to peddle the GMB line. And the worry is, the GMB have just been totally discredited and found to be rotten from pillar to post and right to the core, riven with misogynism. So why is Claire Baker being their mouthpiece?
It was the GMB, what's his face? Richard Leonard was an official with the GMB. It was the GMB
that refused to support the women in Glasgow.
Yeah, they refused to support equal pay for women in Glasgow City Council. It's
There is a bigger question here though, because the BiFab, the contracts BiFab can't win. It's subsidized Chinese companies, not necessarily in China. I think there's actually a Saudi Arabian company have got part of the contract.
Well, they're
heavily subsidized.
In the Korea and the United Arab Emirates, mate. But then they're companies that, sorry, they're countries that Britain will bend over and pucker up towards to get any kind of trade deal with. So Britain is not going to change its stance and give these countries a hard time for subsidising their businesses and putting our guys out of work. Tories won't do it.
I think one of the things I was surprised about when it comes to the GMB, I assume it was the GMV, Sandra White, who always looks to me as though she should be a communist union organiser. She's a
Cheeky bugger.
She's a Glasgow Keely. She really is very Glasgow.
She's a fantastic MSP, you cheeky sod. She's just a wee bit short.
She was talking about IKEA and how, well, my own daughter had a confrontation with IKEA, took them to tribunal and won. Anyway, apparently IKEA sacked the union rep, this union rep in Glasgow. And although Sandra White didn't mention his name, the First Minister said, "Oh, I know Richie, but I'd better not say anything personal." But she said, "I've worked with Richie and I've worked against him."
Well, it's indicative of some. IKEA have sacked this boy. I know people are trying to get him his job back, but Ken, what he'd be better? He's better going to Asda or something like that, because I'm sorry, IKEA are big and ugly enough to turn into the Scottish Government and just tell them to ram it. They wouldn't care what the Scottish Government say to them.
What did he get sacked for?
Union activities, but that's, mate.
Are IKEA not unionised?
IKEA are unionised, mate, but he was overstepping the mark according to IKEA.
I mean, I have to admit, having been both an employer and, well, at one point a union rep, I was really lucky in the fire brigade because everybody had been at that bottom level and worked their way up. So everybody understood what on the ground actually meant. At some point in their career, they'd been there. And it was much easier to have sensible, especially about practical things, discussions with them, you know.
Yeah, when I was in the post office, that was just changing. The post office had always promoted from within. So the managers had all been on the front face as well, but that was kind of changing. You know, if you'd had a management training course with Asda or the Co-op, you were a shoe-in for a job at the post office as a manager. And frankly, managers are, other than shiny toilet paper, managers are probably the least useful thing in Royal Mail, because all they do is stand and shout at you to get the job done, when it was job and finish when I was here. And everybody wanted to get the job done and out the door. Come on, mate.
Aye. No, I wouldn't like to be a union rep these days. You've got much power at all.
Well, there's constant rumours as well. You know, this BA thing has it's taken a back seat because of COVID, but there's a rumour now that British Gas are looking to de-recognise Unison, and then they would like to sack all their employees and re-employ them. They're trying to get Unison out the road first. If that's true, that's going to end up a massive story. Because British Gas are a big firm and they pay well. The minute that people are even daft enough to let British Gas get rid of the union in there, their jobs are going to be rotten.
I hadn't thought of that. I mean, we are facing, well, I know nothing about Sunak's plan, so you can tell me and the viewer and listener about it, but we are facing at some point huge unemployment and huge changes in some very well-paid businesses, as you say, aviation.
It depends how the money's used. If the money's used for the shareholders and to line the pockets of the directors, But if the money's used to diversify, train, it's almost a sacrifice worth making. I mean, you mentioned Sunak. I mean, I listened to his presentation to the Commons today, and basically furlough's gone. The government will cover part-time working wages. So effectively, to keep your workforce up, people can work a third of their hours. My understanding is that an extra third is then paid by the government, and then the last third is paid by the company. So the companies...
They're going to get the extra money.
No, how it works, mate, is that the employer's effectively paying you half your wage for the minimum of a third of your operating hours, and then the government will pay about 22%. So you're not getting your full salary. It was less than a
third. I thought I'd maybe got that wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, the government's effectively, you're going to get about 72% of your salary.
Right.
But you'll only be working a third of your operating hours for that.
Oh, well,
and if you were doing half hours, effectively, you're going to get almost your full salary because the government are still going to be chipping in. So
well, that'll suit a few tradesmen. You know, they'll only have to work a third of the week for their for 3/4 of their salary.
Yeah, but
go up and do homers.
Well, the interesting one, Stuart, is he like Norrie said, it was a presentation, and he made a big point of saying this is aimed at small to medium enterprises, and larger companies will only qualify under certain qualifications and what have you. But I didn't believe him at that point because of that bit smacked off you know, it smacked the sleight of hand. And in the past, they've told us, we're spending this amount or that amount. And huge percentages have gone, as Norrie said, to shareholders, to big firms who have just salted it away because that's what they do.
Well, if that's what he did say, I'm surprised there wasn't a huge gasp from the opposition benches.
No, I mean, they're calling it they're comparing it to the German scheme, which I haven't been able to really find in detail anywhere. I'll have another look for it.
The devil will be in the detail, Norrie, because anything that they've done in the past, they've had to constantly tweak it because they've missed this group or that group. Hopefully that won't happen this time because every group's covered. But
I don't think that was a mistake, Jimmy. I'm sorry.
No,
I think those gaps will widen with this. I do think there'll be bigger chunks. The other big thing is he's extending the payment period for the loans everybody's taken out from 6 years to 10 years. So he's basically just extending the burden on business.
And he's letting hospitality and tourism businesses, their VAT is going to stay at 5% till next year.
Okay, so is that all the help the hospitality got?
Yeah, until we see the detail. I mean,
until we get all the detail.
I think they've just decided that they're going to take the hit. They'd rather pay the unemployment.
Well, the unemployment will probably be cheaper. They've probably worked out the numbers and thought, how many are going to get laid off? How many are we going to have to support through the winter and that? How many? And you know them. They'll think, oh, brilliant, it's winter, but by next spring, they'll think they'll manage to, you know, Tories, mate, they'll think they'll manage to create 1 million jobs in the middle of the pandemic. They will, because there'll be crap, low-paid jobs that nobody wants today, but we'll have to take them because the Tories will chase them off the benefits.
But there's the knock-on effect to default on mortgages, car loans, blah, blah, blah. I don't understand why they don't.
I'm not so sure they're fussed about that, mate, because at the end of the day, the banks didn't lose out when people default on their car loans or their mortgages. It's the people that lose it.
But
I mean, bank shareholders are still all right, and that's the only people that Tories are bothered about.
But the companies in between do lose out, and that creates more unemployment and so on. I mean, I'm not gonna for a minute say there's an easy solution to this. There isn't. Apart from stopping people offshoring their tax and taxing the rich more. There's the solution, and they won't do that.
No.
And of course, we're back to where we were last year, with the Scottish Government having no idea what their budget's going to be, so unable to plan for next year. And councils screaming, no doubt, at the door of the Scottish Government asking for certainty about the money they're getting.
I think we
because
can
Richie's not having a budget.
I think we can safely say they will keep things as opaque as possible and screw the Scottish Government and Scottish local government as much as they can. They will screw us out of as much as they possibly can by not having a budget.
Well, I think our Barnett consequentials are going to cease to exist. I think what's going to happen is that the government will use, the Westminster government will spend Barnett consequentials on our behalf.
Yes, it'll go direct. It'll bypass the Scottish Parliament.
I think that's what's going to happen.
We've seen that coming.
I think I think it's a very brave London government that takes that stance.
I don't think they care anymore, Jimmy.
We are going to rip up the Barnett formula, and we are going to direct fund.
No, they won't rip up the Barnett formula. What they'll do is they will spend money in Scotland, and basically the consequentials will be the pot they take it out of.
They can't until they get their internal market bill through the House of Lords. That would breach the devolution settlement, and their internal market bill is not going on the statute books as quickly as they think.
Well, I think they'll get there with it, because I don't think, I think because Tories are unionists, they'll vote it through. They do not see a problem with the Westminster government overriding devolved responsibilities.
Aye, but Labour and the Liberals have to vote against it, and the Tories haven't got a majority in the Lords. So they're not even close. No, they're not even close to a majority in the Lords, mate. It'd probably need to ennoble about another 100 people.
Well, I could see there being 100 cummy Lords, or shall we call them Dom Lords?
Non-Dom Lord. Oh, you're not allowed to be a non-Dom Lord anymore, are you?
Are you not?
No, I think you've got to live here now to be in the House of Lords. I think there was the
Ashcroft.
They have a big Ashcroft thing about that. Aye, that was.
Aye, he resigned his lordship, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Because his non-Dom tax status was far more important than sitting in the House of Lords.
Well, you don't want to be paying tax.
Yes,
absolutely not.
I'm surprised to see just who does live in places like Monaco. Is that Duncan Bannatyne, the Scotsman that owns the gyms?
Aye, and loves to do a lot of whinging, but aye, he's in. What was his? Philip Green's another one, isn't he?
He got thrown out the Navy, didn't he? Bannatyne.
He'd get thrown in my taxi if ever.
In the Navy. Sorry, as soon as you mentioned that, I'm away with a stupid song.
Okay, lads. Anybody spot anything else that they want to have a good whinge about? Jimmy?
I want to have a whinge, mate. Miles Briggs. Miles Briggs stood up and went on about safe play and how they've no opened yet and how they were at Parliament protesting through the week. But he said something in his question that got right up my nose. You know, people need a safe play environment for their children. They've got one. It's your hoose, ya wallopers. Dinna breed if you can't bloody look after you. Nobody needs soft play centres to bloody live a decent life, apart from people that work in soft play centres. You know, the safe play environment for your children right now is your own bloody home.
I don't think Jimmy's got any children, has he?
I would like to do an old fogey thing here. I would like to ask why they invented soft play centres. Have we run out of woods and rivers and fields and gardens?
Have you spent any time in a soft play centre?
Yes, I have.
It's the smell of piss that puts me off.
No, mate, it's just full of women who are sitting there drinking coffee, eating cake, and their bairns are running about daft. But
Jimmy,
they're not having to look after them.
I have to tell you, there are soft play centres with bars. Now, there's a good reason to have a soft play centre.
I don't know. I've been in one once in my life, mate, and I had a hip flash with me, so I didn't care if there was a bar or not.
What was the one down at New Haven?
It's got a bar. Of course it does.
You could sit there all day and get steaming.
Oh, that's an awful drinking and eating establishment, mate. Let's be clear, that had more mice than it had self chicken dinners and it sell a shitload of chicken dinners. So,
so there's a reason for a soft play centre. Okay, I answered my own question. Stuart, you got anything?
I've got good news. Somebody who I've never heard of called Jamie Blackett, he's an old Etonian who's got an estate in the south of Scotland, and whose Wikipedia, he calls himself a writer on Wikipedia. He's got a Wikipedia entry which is 2 paragraphs long, which is clearly written all of it himself. He's now the deputy leader under George Galloway on Alliance, Alliance to Save the Union.
Was he an ex-para or Marine or something, isn't he?
He's an ex-everything, mate. He's one of these wallopers that runs about in, the pink cords and brogues and all that nonsense. Country gentleman bumpkin type. He's like, the only reason he's no David Coburn is because he's not quite as thick as that, but he's no far off him.
He's posh gammon. He's even got the face for it,
Mm.
And he's, you took the words out of my mouth, Jimmy. There, what a tosser. Anyway, he's apparently he would offer the greatest living Scotsman after Sir Alec Ferguson, the Spectator chairman Andrew Neil, the job as First Minister in the government of Scotland.
This was actually in the Spectator.
This was.
It's actually it's their attempt at a relaunch, mate. Ken how George Galloway's wife lost the plot and started going on about kids getting taught about anal sex with bloody Nutella and bananas.
Right.
They went all quiet, and this is their attempt at a relaunch again, but George and his missus nowhere near it. This boy's just about as big a clown.
Well, I don't know how I got to it. It must have popped up in my timeline. I do read The Spectator, I have to confess, but I couldn't believe it was printed in The Spectator.
I mean, he says here, he obviously can't see. He must have very strange spectacles because he watches Nicola Sturgeon, the unchallenged leader of a one-party state on the BBC, answering useless questions from selected journalists who offered no interrogation. What is he looking at?
I mean, it's laughable. A one-party state. How do you get have you ever heard of a one-party state with a minority government?
On the day that the polls show 60% support from the voters for the SNP.
This is a man who's standing to sit in a parliament that he doesn't understand.
Well, I read the article and I was very tempted to read it like it was some sort of satire, a script from Nice but Dim.
Well, that's why it's an attempt at a relaunch, mate, because I read that exact same article with a few differences about 2 months ago, and it was laughable then, but that's why they've printed it out again recently, because George's missus made a pig's lug with the Nutella nonsense.
So we've got Professor Alan Sked of the LSE, apparently the original architect of Brexit, who lives in Easter Ross, and an ex-regimental sergeant major called Arthur Keith of the Black Watch. He's got these people aboard. What fun.
Brilliant. You can
regimental sergeant major. That's what we need in Parliament.
I bet you that ex-Razman is one of these clowns that nobody else that's a veteran ever speaks to. Because usually a Razman was a well-respected and somebody you would look up to in that. But if he's getting involved with George Galloway, he's obviously a bigger ass than 2 bums.
With a big grey handlebar moustache.
In any case, Patrick Harvey and his pals had better watch out because they're going for the Green Party, which they call the SNP's gardening section.
All right. I bet you a guy walks about with an umbrella under his arm like it's a paste stick.
And he claims to be the Deputy Lord Lieutenant of Dumfries and Galloway.
I'll tell you what, it's going to be hilarious, mate. Everybody I know has now been barred on Twitter, Facebook and everything. They've been blocked by George Galloway and Alliance for Unity.
Everybody's everybody's proud to stick it up on Twitter. They all say, I'm now barred.
He'll now have absolutely no Twitter traffic apart from the absolute Fruit Loops who actually believe that George Galloway could be a useful addition to Scottish politics. The quicker he buggers off back down to London or Bradford or wherever he lives now, the better.
I don't think I follow him. I might surreptitiously follow him and not say anything, just to see what the lunatics are saying.
You can't. I tried that for about a fortnight, mate, and I was barred inside 3 days. I thought I'll just creep on George Galloway in the Alliance for Unity for a fortnight, but I couldn't do it. You have to just comment now and again, because if you want to laugh, if you're having a bad day, just go to the comment section and just cheer yourself up and think, I'll never, ever be as bad as these clowns.
Well, as I say, when I read the Spectator article, I couldn't understand it. Why are they publishing this nonsense? Until we got to the last couple of lines, and he said that Andrew Neil should be standing as an MSP.
Yeah, should be the new First Minister of Scotland.
I wish he would stand as an MSP.
Oh, so they are, because he would get. Oh, what do you reckon? I suppose that kind of Tories have still got a vote, so he would get some of the gammon.
I'd get Gordon Brown standing supporting him.
Yeah, probably that would be it. Labour Party, ex-Labour Party members over the age of 90.
The salary for an MSP wouldn't cover his expenses for the year.
Wouldn't he supply him with his commuting expenses to France?
Mm.
Is it France he's in, or is it?
He's in Provence somewhere, isn't he?
Mm.
Is that why he doesn't appear on BBC telly very much? Because he'd have to come over
No,
to France.
I think he doesn't appear on BBC telly very much because they can't afford him.
Well,
He's lost every spot he had.
Mm.
they're still paying huge amounts of money for people.
I don't think he even does the one-day daily politics thing.
No, he's not done anything since the Andrew Neil show got dropped.
So he's now doing Spectator telly once a week.
Does he do Times? Are we showing Times TV as well? As you know, Times radios. Does he know got something there?
Maybe, but he's definitely doing.
He'll be on
a
that
video cast on Spectator TV.
He'll be on the new version of Fox News that they're bringing over.
I think what he's doing is he's trying to keep a presence so he can get on Fox News UK.
He'll be behind that, mate. He was Murdoch's man for years, but with the influence that he's had over the BBC over the last few years, Rupert will probably want him involved in that.
I'm not sure. I always used to think he'd had a falling out with Murdoch, but about a month ago he mounted quite a vicious defence of him against somebody somewhere. I can't remember where. But he's got a few jobs. I mean, he's still editor-in-chief of The Spectator or CEO of The Spectator or whatever.
He's got a couple of nice wee directorships over in the States as well, with a couple of these daft wee alt-right sites and whatever.
Well, anything else, chaps? Anything funny?
They'll be looking to hire miners in Kent because there'll be a lot of smuggling going on because they're putting a border between Kent and the rest of England. You're going to need a special visa to drive a lorry into Kent.
Who knew it was that easy to become independent, eh? If Scotland just declares itself a big fucking car park, we'd have got independence a couple of years ago.
We're at the wrong end of the country, mate. Mm. What I want to know is how they're going to stop the immigration from Kent.
Sorry, I just had a vision of Nigel Farage's Blakey, and then Nigel Farage in an inspector's uniform. Get that bus out.
Rachel Reeves had a really good line in Parliament yesterday, which I hope you appreciate. Here's the quote: "Today's warnings are based on an able worst case scenario. But given the reasonably worst case government we have, I can assume those scenarios would probably happen."
Well done, Rachel.
I thought it was quite good. She's not renowned for her quips, but that was a good one.
I'm thinking that somebody's fed her that one, mate. Somebody's written that one for her.
I think so. I don't think I've got anything to add, Stuart.
No, I think I'm quite happy with that.
Jimmy?
No, I'm all mined out, mate.
All mined out. Okay, thanks for being with us, Stuart Lockhead.
Bye-bye.
Jimmy Hutton, nice to have you back. I'm Norris Stewart. Thanks for listening, folks. Tomorrow's Friday, so don't forget your hats. Cheers for now.